Hey y'all, what's up? How y'all doing? Happy Friday. Sorry I'm a little late. My Friday had a lot going on, but I'm glad to be here. Um, I hope everyone is well. Today I want to talk about the history of the Ukraine with Gardis and Big Mike. We're still waiting on Big Mike. I know that on Friday he usually has teachings and things going on, but we are here. Gardis is here, and it was so funny today. I went to the grocery store and the prices were just crazy. The prices were crazy. And I was someone asked me what I did. I ran into them from high school and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Hey, subscribe to my YouTube channel." Never do that. Don't do that. But since my name is out there already, I just did it. So I was like, "Hey, we're gonna be talking about the Ukraine." And so the young lady I was talking to, she said, "Oh yeah, where the president wife is from." And I was like, "Oh, this is such a good subject because I think they're all sort of over there." So I'm gonna bring Gardis Watts up next. And thanks for being here. Hey, Brandon. Hey, Potato. I hope everything's well with you guys. All right, bringing up Gardis. Hey, Gardis.
Hey, what's going on, Bert?
How you doing today? Happy
All right.
Friday.
Happy Friday to you too.
I was running around today all day, and I was doing errands. And hey, Gardis, that's your color. We talk fashion over here. That burgundy, that maroon, we call it. That's your color right there. We were talking about I told a young lady I went to high school with. I said, "Hey, come on my channel," and she said she'll be here tonight, and it'll be so funny if she catch me saying this. But I said we talk about history and stuff on Fridays or Thursdays, and I said we're talking about the Ukraine, and she said, "Oh, where the where the president of the United States wife is from." And I said, "You know what? That's such a good theory because everyone thinks that Ukraine and Russia, and I think Melania is Slavian. Is that from Slovakia? I don't know.
Czechoslovakia, yeah.
Czechia, and they separated too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Slovakia, yeah.
Yeah, so over there, Ukraine is next to Russia, and sometimes people all sound similar to us here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And now. What's Georgia? What's that? Why did I say Georgia over there? Do I got the wrong map? What's that?
No, that's right. That's the country of Georgia.
The country of Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And I visited Turkey, and when I met people, they all sound. I'd be like, "Oh, they sound Russian," but they were not Russian. They were Czechoslovakian, or they were from Hungary or Romania or the Ukraine, which seems like it's bigger than all these other countries. Ukraine and Russia are the biggest, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'll let you take it away and tell us about how we start off the history of the Ukraine and how did we get to this with Trump and the president of the Ukraine.
Yeah. So, I want to add too that this actually was a gift from my mom. So,
she knew your color.
Yeah,
that's a really good color.
Yeah, you said it looks good on me, so I, thank my mom.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mama Gardis, Mama Watts.
All right. So apparently millions of Americans last week saw the bizarre meeting going on between President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky was there to sign a deal with the United States in order to kind of get military support for his ongoing war. In exchange for U.S. support against the war against his ongoing war against Russia, Zelensky had agreed for U.S. corporations to extract precious metals from Ukraine to develop stuff like batteries, airplanes, and sophisticated military weapons. What turned out to be a no-holds-barred deal escalated into a heated debate. Trump and Vance castigated Zelensky on not being grateful for the support he was getting from this country. And since the start of the Ukraine-Russia war, this country has poured billions of dollars into the Ukraine side. Zelensky eventually clapped back, accusing the current regime of making false deals with Russian President Vladimir Putin. After the intense back and forth, Zelensky was escorted out of the White House with nothing signed. So why did this hostile exchange take place? What was really going on in the Ukraine? Why are people like Vladimir Putin politically villainized by the Western nations? Was Trump right when he accused Zelensky of nearly starting World War III? Is Zelensky right when he said that Putin has broken ceasefire deals? And what does this have to do with us? All of these questions can be answered with some historical analysis, which I will try to do within the time frame. And most of it has to deal with the history that most historians label the Cold War. Now, for those who are not familiar with the Cold War, nor did they pay attention in your history class, the Cold War was a rivalry between the United States and the former Soviet Union that started in 1945 at the end of World War II and continued all the way up to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was termed cold because there was actually no direct conflict with the US and the Soviet Union. Most of the conflict was fought through proxy wars, which included Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, just to kind of name a few. There was also geopolitical conflict where the two sides would fight for influence through foreign policy. Then you had the economic battles, considering that these were the two largest economies in the world during their time. And then other battles that they would have, like the space race, spying, and propaganda was, just to name a few. What's interesting in the situation is that the two biggest states in the Soviet Union was Russia and Ukraine. What's even stranger was the tension between the two groups had started well over a century ago. The Russians and the Ukrainians are actually relatively cousins, both belonging to an Eastern European ethnic group. And you said it, Berg, earlier, they were known as the Slavs or the Slavic people. This is sort of like the Eastern European group that's in that particular area. Now, even in their time together as the Soviet Union, their tensions were still there. While Ukraine signed a deal in 1922 to be part of the Soviet Union, their tensions started as early as 1930. There was a famine that happened that year called the Holodomor, Holodomor, if I can remember, or it was called the Ukraine famine, which actually killed millions of Ukrainians. Ukraine, which is actually called the breadbasket of Eastern Europe, is actually the largest exporter of wheat in the world. They experienced this famine, and many historians believe that this was actually man-made. Repressive policies by then Soviet President Joseph Stalin was supposedly there to punish Ukraine because Stalin actually felt that Ukrainian nationalists was trying to break away from the Soviet Union. Then there was the issue of the Ukrainians collaborating with the Nazis during World War II. When the Germans planned an invasion on the Soviet Union, the Nazis was able to make a deal with the Ukrainian nationals to actually use Ukraine as their base of operations. Led by a Ukrainian nationalist named Stephen Bandera, they assisted the Nazis to invade Russia in exchange for independence from the Soviet Union. When the Nazis failed to capture Moscow, their promises by the Nazis for independence fell out the window. Bandera was banished from the country and was on the KGB's most wanted list. Ironically, Bandera is considered a Ukrainian national hero despite his ties to Nazi Germany. If people remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was several Ukrainian mayors, one including Vladimir Klitschko, who is a mayor in Ukraine. He's actually the former boxer. He had if I can remember, he had a picture of a guy. A lot of people didn't know who it was, and it was actually Steven Banderas. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 91, Ukraine became an independent nation. However, a military alliance that was formed after World War II called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which consisted of a group of anti-Soviet nations led by the United States, started to become a point of contention with Ukraine and the Russian Federation. Even though the Soviet Union is no more, NATO actually still exists to this day. And right before the Soviet Union's dissolution in 91, former Secretary of State James Baker, under the George Bush Sr. administration, had a meeting with then Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev to assure that there would be no NATO expansion, not 1 inch towards Russia. Unfortunately, tensions started to brew when the U.S. started to renege on their promise of NATO expansion. In 2004, Ukraine had a hotly contested election between two popular candidates, Viktor Yushchenko and Viktor Yanukovych, the two victors. The result of this election showed that Yanukovych won by a narrow margin. However, Yushchenko claimed that there was fraud and corruption in the election and demanded a recount. Yushchenko supporters took to the streets to protest to demand a recount. Up to 500,000 people took to the streets of Ukraine. This was the start of what historians call the Orange Revolution. There was claims that Yanukovych was friendly to the Russian government and Vladimir Putin. However, media reports have noted that the U.S. poured $65 million to the 2004 Ukrainian elections from what people is to believe to have Yushchenko get elected, since he was influenced by the United States and the West. Now, needless to say, the Ukrainian high courts called for a special recount and ended up giving the election to Yushchenko. What was interesting about that election is the ethnic dynamics that the people on the outside started to realize about Ukraine. Berg, if you pull up a map of Ukraine, I want to show something. Ukraine is actually made up of two major ethnic groups, Ukrainians and Russians. The Ukrainians live on the majority western part of the country, while the Russian-speaking people live on the eastern part of the border of Russia, called the Donbass. If you see on the map, it's kind of you kind of see on the lower eastern side, on the eastern side is where the the Russians live at, because if you see on the eastern side, it borders Russia. So the Donbass region is in that particular area. So it's estimated that 65 to 70% of the residents of Ukraine are actually ethnic Ukrainians, and the rest are Russians living in Ukraine. Most of the Russian-speaking Ukrainians, like I said, they live in the Donbass. The thing is that there are a lot of mixed families in Ukraine and also in Russia, because they're closely related cousins, because they both belong to the Slavic people. Yushchenko supporters were majority Ukrainian ethnic groups, and the Yanukovych supporters were majority the Russian Ukrainians from the Donbass region in the east. Yushchenko's term as Ukrainian president was marred with internal conflicts, where at one point he was allegedly attempting to illegally dissolve the parliament because he was at odds with most of the people that actually supported him in the Orange Revolution. One of Yushchenko's goals was to enter Ukraine into NATO, something he knew that would anger the Russian government. So in the 2008 NATO summit, then President George Bush Jr. clearly stated that the goal was to enter Ukraine and the country of Georgia, the country that you had questions about, Berg, into NATO. These were both former Soviet republics and actually staunch enemies to Russia. Well, the Russian President Vladimir Putin didn't take kindly to the invitation and immediately invaded the Republic of Georgia later on that year as a warning. At that point, Putin realized that the U.S. was going to back out on their word of not expanding NATO, so he had to take some actions to defend his country of Russia. Now, Viktor Yanukovych, the guy who lost in the 2004 election, actually won the presidential election in 2010 with actually no scandal. However, his scandal would come in the form of a political decision that would cost him his political career, nearly his life, and the future of his country. Yanukovych was a centrist when it came to foreign policy. While it's known that he was kind of favorable to negotiating with Russia, he still had hopes of joining the European Union or the EU and taking an economic deal with the EU that would propel Russia into a first world nation. While he had the ear of Yanukovych, Putin attempted to make a counteroffer to his EU deal. Yanukovych was not easy to bargain with, according to Putin. He made several offers to Yanukovych for an economic deal. Putin finally made a deal that involved reducing the price of gas, which they were getting from Russia, and a no-strings-attached loan that matched what the International Monetary Fund was offering. When the EU decided not to match that deal, Yanukovych took the Russia deal. This infuriated the European nations and the United States. This also caused tension amongst the population that was going to spark something that shifts it into a deadly conflict we kind of see today. So in 2013, mass protests were being organized against the Yanukovych government on rejecting the EU deal. There was a small group of far right-wing Nazi sympathizers. Let me repeat that. Nazi sympathizers that originated in the northern eastern part of Ukraine that started not only to lead a mass protest, but attack Ukrainian police, military personnel, and all of those who supported Yanukovych. The far right-wing Nazi groups like Right Sector and the Svoboda Party started riots in several parts of the country. This mass mobilization against Yanukovych was known as the Maidan Revolution or the Revolution of Dignity. The United States and several European countries supported these protesters. And even though there were Nazi elements leading the charge, that did not matter to the United States or the European countries. They still sent support to the protesters and ensured the protesters that they would do anything to rid themselves of their democratically elected president. This even got to the point where U.S. officials, U.S. senators was making an appearance at these protests. Senator John McCain was in the capital city of Kiev, or the capital city of Ukraine called Kiev, who was amongst the protesters agitating them. Another senator, Victoria Nuland, was passing out cookies to the anti-government protesters. These people were not encouraging peace, but violent overthrow of their government to extreme measures, even if it has to support neo-Nazi groups to do it. Oh yeah, and by the way, during that time, $22 million of our taxpayer money was used to support the protesters.
Whoa.
Exactly. And that was only the start. Matter of fact, later on, Victoria Nuland, in a Senate hearing on Ukraine, said that it was almost $1 billion that they spent. So unfortunately, Yanukovych was forced out of office, and the country held a special election in 2014 where they elected a billionaire, Petro Poroshenko. When Poroshenko got into office, he immediately deputized the Nazis involved in the coup against Yanukovych and armed them and dubbed them the Azov Battalion, AZOV. So there is literally a neo-Nazi brigade currently residing in the Ukrainian army. This immediately sparked a civil war where the Ukrainian army immediately attacked the predominantly Russian-speaking Donbass region. And since that time, war has broken out. And while there was an armistice signed in 2015 called the Minsk Agreements, the fighting continued later that year. The Donbass, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, all majority Russian-speaking Ukrainians, decided by referendum to detach themselves from the Ukraine and actually join the Russian Federation. Now, in 2019, former comedian and reality TV star Vladimir Zelensky was elected president. I did not stutter. Former comedian and reality TV star Vladimir Zelensky was elected president. He continued to garner support from the U.S. even though Donald Trump was the president and has been accused of being a Putin puppet. But if you all remember in the press conference last week, Donald Trump did make reference to him giving Javelin missiles. These are tank-destroying missiles to the Ukraine in their war efforts. And he was right. He did do that. He also broke 2 nuclear deals with Russia that the United States had since the 1980s. During Trump's first term, he actually supported the Ukraine in their efforts. Now, fast forward the next year to 2020 when Joe Biden gets elected. Now, Biden is a starch hardliner against Russia and Putin, and actually a war hawk, because in his nearly 50-year career, Joe Biden was part of a Congress that was in the midst of the Cold War during that time. If you all remember, Biden started his career I think in the late 60s, early 70s, around that time. This is in the middle of the Cold War. So he started talking of giving NATO membership to Ukraine, something that hasn't been talked up by U.S. presidents since George Bush Jr. Trump didn't even talk it up. Neither did Obama, but he did. Now, once again, this infuriated Putin, and he mounts he calls a military operation in February 2022, claiming Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, where it claims self-defense in the interest of their country. Many nations who side with the United States condemn Russia for their actions and place economic sanctions on Russia. However, this cuts off the gas going to Europe and Ukraine because Russia is the biggest exporter of gas in the region. This also brings Russia closer to China, which is historically, they're historically actually enemies. But this new partnership with China partners them with a rising superpower in the world. While there are still sanctions on Russia, it has not decimated their economy as the U.S. and several Western nations thought it would because of their trade with China. Up until last week, when military aid was paused to Ukraine, the U.S. was still giving that country hundreds of billions of dollars for military aid. Now that Trump has returned to office, I think Trump is starting to go with a strategy that might fall flat on his face. Now, many people, well, very few people, well, I wouldn't say very few people, but most people who look at this situation with political open eyes realize that Ukraine is in a winless war. And to my surprise, even Trump realizes that Ukraine is losing this war against the third largest army in the world. So going back to the meeting of last week, so from my perspective, what he plans on doing is he's planning on negotiating a peace deal to Putin without Zelensky. And the reason why he's doing this deal with Putin is he wants Putin to side with him when they go up against China. China, bigger fish that Trump wants to catch. I'm not sure if Trump will be successful because China has offered a lot to Russia during these last couple of years. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, why is this actually important? Well, for one, your tax dollars is funding this. The U.S. spends $820 billion a year in military. $820 billion a year. The highest spending of military in all of the nations in the world. Matter of fact, it is estimated that the U.S. spends a combined more or as much as the next 9 nations that's behind it. So you can imagine the amount of spending that's going on. So we're feeding the war machines with all of these billions of dollars, not including the billions of dollars that was given freely to Ukraine, money that they just printed out of thin air. And also several military aids that goes to other countries like Israel. And yet we have homeless people here.
Mm-hmm.
We have people who can't find jobs. We're cutting aid. We're cutting aid to underprivileged children in schools, lunch programs. We're making it harder to pay for college for our youth. We are closing a lot of factories in the sake of, giving big corporation, corporate conglomerates nice tax cuts, which I'll get to in a minute, which prompts a lot of these CEOs and rich billionaires like Elon Musk, government contracts.
Well, he's doing it for free. Yeah.
All right. And also big bonuses during Christmas and whatever time that they get bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this money fueling the war industry because of the fact that many people get rich off the war. The unfortunate part is the people who don't get rich are the working class and the poor, because the money that goes into it goes to very few military corporations. Many people argue that Trump is trying to dismantle NATO, which is not true. What Trump wants to do is he wants, and he says this himself, he always says that he wants the rest of the NATO countries to pay their fair share. What that means is that he wants the countries to pour more money into U.S.-based military companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, because these are U.S.-based military companies. So Trump is actually wanting more money from the European Union to go into the United States coffers. So it's nothing to do with dismantling NATO. Another thing that is important about this is the possibility of World War III. Now, when the Soviet Union dissolved in 91, the United States was the sole world superpower of the world. Today, you don't have that anymore. The world has gone from what they call a unipolar world, which had the United States on top of everybody, to a multipolar world where China now is a superpower and Russia has become a superpower. So with that being said, the Cold War is still going on. It's just that now there's a third player in it called China, which actually Trump wants to shift the focus of the Cold War, not on Russia, but to China. And why is that? Because China is a predominantly non-white country. And since the Moors ruled Europe in the for nearly 8 centuries, there hasn't been a predominantly non-white country that has been a superpower in this world. So this also tends to a white supremacist ideology where, you know, the white nationalist nations run by, you know, white nationalists like Donald Trump don't want to see China rule the world. So the possibility of World War III gets stoked in this whole conversation. And when you're talking about World War III, we're not talking about, you know, just ground forces going to a neutral site and soldiers just shooting each other. No, we're talking about 3 fully loaded nuclear. These are nuclear nations that will bomb the world to oblivion. China and Russia have something that the United States had just purchased, and they're called hypersonic missiles. Now, the thing is that the United States has a good defense missile system that can target a lot of the old technology of IBCM missiles. However, China has developed something called hypersonic missiles, where they're missiles that can go as fast as the speed of sound and can hit any U.S. city within 30 minutes.
Excuse me? What? I'm sorry. Yeah. What?
Yes.
I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, go ahead, Gardis. I'm sorry.
And also
hypersonic missiles are a challenging technology to master.
They can also maneuver the defense systems that the U.S. has, because the U.S. missile defense system is relatively outdated. So that being said, we're talking about countries with serious nuclear arsenals. We're not even going to go to Russia, because Russia, you know, from the Soviet Union days, still has their nuclear arsenal, but they also have hypersonic missiles. So in the sense of a nuclear war, nobody actually wins, and the only losers are the people who are still remaining, who haven't died from the nuclear blast or the fallout. So this is a concern, because if World War III happens, it doesn't matter what immigrants are coming in, what budget cuts are being spent, who's the mayor of Dolton.
What about Tiffany?
World War III is going to overshoot all of those issues. So, in a sense, we have to pay attention to foreign policy, because this is something that a lot of the anti-war protesters in the 60s and 70s really started to go against our government because during that time, the Vietnam War protest was highly popular because of the fact that many of the soldiers who were going were young people, in particular, a lot of young Black folks were going, and some of them weren't coming back alive, or they're coming back with several mental issues and drug addictions. And the government, unfortunately, never takes care of its veterans. Some say even to this day, most of the veterans, there are some veterans out here who are homeless, who can barely make ends meet, but yet they've taken a bullet for this country. They've gone on to overseas to fight for this country, and yet this country treats them like any other working class or poor citizen, which basically is nothing. And I think off the tail ends of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where during that time the Soviet Union was trying to put missiles in Cuba and almost triggered World War III during that time, I think a lot of Americans at the late 60s, and this is including the civil rights movement that happened during that time, because many, I would say Malcolm X, who we talked about last couple of weeks ago, was one of the more prominent Black folks out there who railed against the Vietnam War. And then after that, Dr. King, who did his big speech against Vietnam, who lost a lot of friends during that time as well, knew the importance of this conflict and how it would impact global peace, and not just global peace, but the stability of our environment, because war is one of the biggest polluters out here. When you're shooting tanks and you're shooting missiles and stuff like that, that releases a lot of gas and it uses a lot of energy. But now when you're talking about nuclear weapons, the only time in history that's ever been released on a nation, which was in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, that still devastates that country to this day. And that was 60 years ago. So we have to pay attention to this because of the fact that, for one, our tax dollars are going there and being wasted. Because, for one, when you talk about the defense of this country, you're talking about aggressive defense that could possibly endanger the citizens of this country. What I mean by that is, the only time the United States should lift their arms up is if this country, this land base, or land bases, across the world, is being attacked by a foreign nation, indiscriminately and unprovoked. That's the only time I believe that we should trigger a military response. However, much of this is not in the defense of national security because of the fact that Russia has been a longtime enemy of the United States. And because of the fact that they're still trying to relive the Cold War, many businessmen are trying to take advantage of this because of the fact that when you're talking about economic sanctions and cutting off trade, this gives business people in the energy industry and the war industry opportunities to make money and to pass the cost on to the working class and poor people who have to either buy or support these products. So right now, that's about it. Any questions?
Thank you for your son's service, Ragin. Ragin Cajun says, and Milo, can't forget Milo. Gardis, my son was stationed in the Iwakuni, am I saying it right, near Hiroshima, 2017 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for thank you. I'll let Gardis, did you have something to say? that Gardis? Okay.
No.
And also, I appreciate you bringing us all this knowledge. I have a question. It may be a silly question. When the president of the Ukraine, when he said that you guys think it's cool because you have an ocean protecting you, did that mean something to you?
Okay, who said that? And
that's what I've been hearing. The president of Ukraine, he said, "Oh, congratulations, Ragin. She has one in the Ukraine, Lord, one in the Marine, and one in the Air Force."
Oh, okay, all right.
So he said, let me see.
Is this in reference to the press conference from last week?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess what Zelensky was saying was, because of the fact that we're on the other side of the ocean, that there's no nation in this side of the hemisphere that can really challenge us. And I think too, what Trump is trying to do with this whole foreign policy is he's basically trying to kind of realign the important strategic points of where U.S. imperialism can be more effective. So the thing about this country, it is an empire, and it's trying to expand its empire across the world. But I think what Trump is going to do is he's going to focus first on the western part of the world, which is our side of the world, which is on the, the west side of the Atlantic Ocean, or if you want to look at it, the east side of the Pacific Ocean. So that means that his influence is going to be more on Canada, Mexico, and South America. And he's going to basically see how much control he can garner in this part of the world, because I think even Trump knows that war in the Ukraine is winless unless they're going to take direct action against Russia themselves, which is not a smart move right now, since Russia and China are partners. And I think right now, if in a military strategic point, it would be smart for him to get Russia on his side if they're going to go against China. Unfortunately, like I said, I may be wrong, but I think that that's not going to work. Putin is not going to go against President Xi Jinping, who is the president of China. He's not going to go against him because of the fact that they've gotten a lot of economic help from China.
Yeah.
And so that strategy is not going to work. Now, however, going back to what Trump is doing with these tariffs that he's trying to place on everybody, including his allies, Trump is generally trying to set up a big tax cut for his rich billionaires. Because the thing was that the tax cuts that he did in his first term put this country in a deficit. And it put it in a deficit because what he tried to do was he tried this trade war against China, and it backfired. It backfired against him. That's why he's reluctant to do it now. And that's why he's pushing off the tariffs against Canada, against Mexico, against China for a month now. So he understands that this trade war is a risky thing. In some economic senses, many people think it's a foolish thing. I think it's foolish as well to have tariffs on all of these nations that we have regular trade with. So now you're about to put your working class and your lower class and poor class people at risk of higher prices at the grocery store, at the gas stations, and whatever we tend to do to make our daily living and what we buy as necessities, because most of our stuff is imported. If you go to Walmart right now, a lot of the products are not made in America. And I would be willing to bet that over half of the items in Walmart are actually made in China, a country that we're about to have a trade war with again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that he's trying to do, where he's trying to build revenue to do a tax cut deal again with his rich billionaire friends, so there won't be such a deficit this time around.
Now, how do you feel? And you guys, thumbs up for Gardis Watts coming through, giving us this knowledge. Thank you so much, Gardis. How do you feel? Who was a better ally for now we're facing Vladimir Xi Jinping? Am I saying right, in China?
Oh, Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping. Who was a better ally? Was it going to be like if we would have had Kamala in there? Would everything be sunshine and roses versus having Trump in there?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, the Democrats they're actually much more war hawkish than the Republicans are, unfortunately to say. So Democrats, and this, you see this under Biden. Biden was full head on in going at Russia, but he also had that same energy for China. So Biden and the Democrats weren't looking to, have one superpower, side with them so they can take out the other superpower. He was looking to fight a war against two superpowers. Whereas at least Trump has some sort of sense, and don't get me wrong, I'm not crediting for him to be intelligent. I'm not a Trump supporter, but if he's going to go at this, he is right to get at least one of the superpowers on his side to go against the other. Because you cannot expend that type of energy fighting two superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds crazy. But Biden and the Democrats were willing to roll with that particular plan, whereas Trump is like, hey, let's see if we can get Russia on our side and fight against China.
Okay.
Now, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Let's see. Brandon Green had a question.
And Big Mike just chimed in. I'm going to bring him up as well.
Okay.
And I sent you a picture. Our friend Raging Cajun and Milo, we can't forget about Milo. She sent me a picture of her son's military uniform. I thought it was just a regular jacket. And it was her. And she showed me the tag and it says made in China. And yeah. Isn't that something?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, show Gardis my son's military outfit. Oh, Big Mike dropped. He'll be right back, I'm sure.
Okay.
Brandon said, without U.S. support, will Putin stop with the Ukraine? Are NATO European nations at risk of Russian invasion?
That's the narrative that many people have put on Putin and Russia because, like I said, Cold War propaganda has made us to believe that Russia is the bad guy and Putin is the next Hitler. And I go to say that I'm actually not a Putin fan. I'm not a supporter of Russia or backs Russia to an extent. However, I am a person who is about peace. And if that means that we need to drop the negative propaganda against Russia, then so be it. But if the U.S. had stopped supporting Ukraine, obviously it looks like, because they had paused military aid to to Ukraine. The U.S. paused military aid to Ukraine, but the EU now is supporting Ukraine. So even though if the U.S. stopped supporting Ukraine, the EU would always step in and support Ukraine. But will Putin stop with Ukraine? You know, to me, Putin for my money actually could have destroyed, decimated, and even occupied Ukraine if to me he wanted to. I've seen a couple of military interviews. I've seen a couple of interviews with military personnel and former military personnel who have a neutral look at this war, are saying that Russia really isn't using their best military equipment in this war. They're using the old equipment, and they've been actually able to capture the regions of the Donbass, Donetsk, and Luhansk, and also Crimea, which actually, from my understanding, was their intention to get those regions, which they still control. Now, there was in the early stages of the 2002 military operation that there was intent to take Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. However, they understood that Russia, which is probably only using maybe 1/4 of their military personnel in this war, they knew they couldn't take Kyiv, so they backed out because, like I said, Russia isn't even using they're not using all of their troops. They're using old technology, and they're still in that particular region, still defending that region. So to me, it wouldn't be smart for Putin, even if the United States wasn't involved. It really wouldn't be smart for Putin to start a war with the European nations, because then, like Great Britain and Germany and France, they'd all be in it. And that conflict alone would cost the Russian army, even though I think the Russian army would still win, but it will probably decimate them to a point where they would feel the pain. But as far as and this goes to the second point of what Brandon said, Russia invading the European Union it's not something that the Russia wants to extend energy on, because of the fact that Russia is an, like they have an imperialist nature within their own Eastern European bloc, whereas they feel like their control is more of Ukraine and Georgia and Kazakhstan and all these other nations that used to be part of the Soviet Union. They really don't care about Eastern Europe. All they just want is Eastern Europe to just stop messing with them, because I think, to me, they're the antagonizers in this whole narrative, including the United States. And like I said, a lot of it has to deal with the Cold War. But the Ukraine is generally one of those chess pieces that Europe uses to get an entry into that Eastern European bloc. Okay. Oh, yeah, Raging Cajun, I did watch the Putin interview. He also has an interview that he did with who's the movie director that did the JFK movie. Did an interview with what's his name? Oliver Stone. He did an interview with Oliver Stone about 10 years ago, and that was actually pretty good as well. But I think the Oliver Stone interview was much more relaxed, and Putin actually revealed a lot more than the Tucker Carlson interview, which he didn't. I mean, he revealed a lot in that interview as well.
Nice. I'm going to bring up Big Mike as well while we're here, Gardis.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Big Mike.
Hey,
you live?
Hey, I apologize. One of my students is building up a financial model, and I didn't know it was going to take as long as it did.
That's okay. Hey, big money, big places. Got it. Big Mike. Big finances. Got it. So I don't know if you heard some of the conversation, but Gardis was giving us history on the Ukraine, and we talked the Cold War. I found out that it's a country of Georgia, which means I didn't pay attention. And what class was that, Gardis, I should have paid attention to?
Oh, world history.
World history. I passed the Constitution and I voted in Dolton. So that's as far as I got. So do you have anything to say about the history of the Ukraine and what's going on now with Trump? And, I know we talked about it via email, but I want your input.
Sure. Well, I don't know how much Gardis has said. I came in through the tail end of the conversation. But so the whole purpose of Putin not wanting, the whole purpose of Putin invading Ukraine is to prevent Ukraine from even joining NATO. And
yeah.
And matter of fact, just to eliminate some of the redundancy, curious to get an overview of what was talked about on this Ukraine conflict, so I won't be saying the same thing twice.
Oh,
yeah. I just basically talked about Ukraine's time in the Soviet Union with Russia, how there's a lot of tension going on between Ukrainian and Russians, even though they come from the same Slavic ethnic group. They just speak different languages. Talked about how Ukraine tried to undermine some people in the Ukrainian nationalists tried to undermine the Soviet Union during World War II when they allowed Nazis to use Ukraine to invade the Soviet Union, which unfortunately didn't work out for the Nazis. I guess apparently they didn't read history as well, because when Napoleon tried to invade Russia, he met the same fate. But talked about when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, how tensions kind of ramped up between Ukraine and Russia. Talked about the 2004 election when Yushchenko and Yanukovych had this close election, and there was parts of election fraud in that. Talked about when Yanukovych became president in 2010, and Yanukovych was cordial to Russia and Putin, and he ended up taking a deal with Russia instead of doing the deal with the European Union. That caused a big stir with the European Union and the United States, and they started funding Yanukovych's opposition, which entailed Nazi groups like the Svoboda group and the Azov Battalion. Talked about when Senator John McCain and Victoria Nuland was in Ukraine trying to stir up anti-protests. Nuland was actually handing out cookies to the protesters. Everybody's ignoring the Nazi element in this whole thing. They coup Yanukovych, bring in Poroshenko. He starts the civil war. Zelensky comes in. He continues the war. And then we go all the way to 2022, where the military operations of Russia in Ukraine starts, because Biden starts talk up again of putting Ukraine into NATO, like you had just said.
Okay. Everything you said is correct on that. You know anything about the specifics of the deal between Donald Trump and Zelensky and that whole fallout?
Well, one of it was talking about, I know the side of the minerals.
Right.
The minerals that are in Ukraine is like minerals like zinc and lithium. And then there's something, and I remember reading about it, but it was like special earth minerals, and these are minerals that they put in weapons. So that's the minerals deal that Donald Trump was having, and I guess the U.S. was either gonna make a peace deal with Putin to withdraw the troops from the region, not necessarily giving up the region back to the Ukrainians, but just basically telling Putin to stand down.
And also, with part of that deal is, to add to that, is the United States is going to have financial resources in Ukraine, and if there's United States resources there, Russia will be less likely to act, because now they're going up against the United States. But again, there was a problem between Zelensky and Trump, and that as it showed in the confrontation in the White House that time.
Yeah, and I also talked about trying to puzzle Trump's strategy. I also mentioned that Trump is, because in Trump's first term, he did pour money into the Ukraine war during that time, when he said that he gave Zelensky javelins. That was correct. They did send javelin missiles, which were tank destroyers, to Ukraine. But I think this time around, Trump he's going to pivot away from that particular region, because of the fact that I think he feels like he's more successful doing a conquest with the western part of the globe, which is, our side, which consists of Canada, Mexico, Central America, and South America. But also, too, he wants to negotiate with Putin. And I think this is something that's not like written in the deal. But I think one of the things that he's going to try to do is he's going to try to get Putin on his side to turn against China and President Xi Jinping. I myself don't think that that's going to work. But, I could be wrong.
I actually agree. I definitely agree on that. Especially now when you got that trade war against China.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate goal for Trump is to have war with China. I think that's what he wants to do within this term of his presidency. But I think even Trump knows that attacking China right now is a stupid thing if you don't have another superpower like Russia on your side.
Agreed. What I know this is about the Ukraine conflict, but I want to hear your take on the North Korea problems that we're seeing here. And I don't know if you are have any knowledge on that. I'm trying to learn more about international geopolitics, just to diversify my knowledge, so I could be as bright and sharp as you. And you know, and because I think all of it is related. When you look at finance, you look at, you know, politics, all of that play hand in hand. And so, I'm bringing this up because a student of mine asked me the other day, what's the difference between North Korea and South Korea? And I couldn't give him an answer. So, you know, and I know that's pure ignorance on my part. And I'm definitely will take accountability for that. But I would like to hear, like, if someone was to come to you and like explain that, like, how would you explain that?
Well, I don't know the exact players, like the Korean players in this, but Korea during World War II was occupied by the Japanese. Now, when the Japanese lost in World War II, Korea was basically divided by the Soviet Union and also the Western nations, and they couldn't come to an agreement. So what the Soviet Union did was they took the northern part of the peninsula, and the United States and the other non-communist countries took the southern part. However, conflict broke out between those two nations because obviously the northern part is communist and the southern part is capitalist. So the United States, in essence, because I think all of this is under the umbrella of the Cold War, which, you know, I was talking earlier to Berg in the chat about this, because Cold War basically is cold because of the fact that while the United States and the Soviet Union had these conflicts, they weren't like direct conflicts with each other, and they had these proxy wars. One of them is Korea. So Soviet Union supporting the North Koreans and United States supporting South Korea. Now, the thing is that ethnically, there's really no difference between North Koreans and South Koreans. The only difference,
part of your life, like lifestyle
and politics is probably the only two things that you can distinguish between a North Korean and a South Korean. Other than that, there is no distinguishment. And it's interesting because when the United States got into the Korean War, they were actually winning that war for the first couple of years and probably could have took the whole peninsula. However, Chinese, who were not necessarily a superpower, but they had a lot of manpower, because obviously, you know, China has the largest population in the world, over 1 billion people. Even back then, they were a large population. They basically told the United States not to cross the 38th parallel, or else they would get into the conflict, because at that time, China actually converted into communism as well. So General Douglas MacArthur, who was credited to be the greatest general in U.S. history, decided the Chinese not going to do nothing. I'm going to cross the 38th parallel. And guess what? The Chinese got involved. So now they're battling on the ground, China and Russia. And they actually ended up driving back the United States because Douglas MacArthur decided he wanted to cross the 38th parallel. So this actually caused tension between President Harry Truman at the time and MacArthur, where Truman ended up firing MacArthur from his position because of his failure in the Korean War. Now, fast forward to, you know, Vietnam, about 2 decades later, they actually didn't want to make that same mistake, even though in the same sense, you got North Vietnamese supported by Russia and South Vietnamese supported by United States. They didn't want to make that same mistake of trying to engulf the whole country like they did with China, like they did with Korea. So they basically kind of maintained their positions in this war. However, because of the fact that they were stationary in South Korea, it was very much hard to tell the difference between a North Korean and a South Korean. I mean, not North Korean, a North Vietnamese and a South Vietnamese. My father, who was stationed in Vietnam for 14 months, talked about his first couple of months there. He realized that this country was not going to win that war, because it was two things he saw. He said that war, they were fighting against an enemy that they couldn't see. Because just like we were saying a couple of minutes ago, how do you tell the difference between a North Vietnamese and a South Vietnamese person?
You mean Korea?
Well, that too. Like, you can't really tell who's from the North and who's from the South because they're all of the same ethnic group. But what was happening was North Vietnamese people were infiltrating Saigon and southern parts of the South. And what they were also doing was they were sending women and children into battle.
Oh.
When my dad saw that, he said, we're not going to win this war, because if an army is willing to send their women and children, they would die for anything.
Oh my God.
And you have to be and from his perspective, it's hard to fight a desperate people, especially when they're willing to do anything to win this war. The problem was that the U.S. was not willing to do anything to win this war. So when he saw that, not only did he say that they weren't going to win this war, but he felt like he wasn't going to get out of there alive.
Wow.
He really felt that he wasn't going to get out of there alive. But, by the grace of God, he was able to get out of there. But,
so why did Johnson keep the war going?
Huh?
Why did Johnson keep the war going?
Well, I mean, Johnson had to appease the people who got him elected, because he promised full scale war with Vietnam. Because if you remember, Kennedy was going to withdraw from Vietnam. Then he gets assassinated. Many people feel like because of the fact that he wanted to withdraw from Vietnam, that he was assassinated. But when Johnson had campaigned to run again as president, he promised the military-industrial complex that he would keep the war going. And so, unfortunately, when he lost to he didn't lose to Nixon, but I think he didn't run again. But Nixon ended up winning, and Nixon had got it to a point where he knew that war was winless. So when Nixon won, he tried this last ditch effort, which is important because this is why China is a superpower right now. Nixon and Kissinger attempted to make a deal with the Chinese president. I can't remember what his name was. It wasn't. I think it was still Mao Zedong. I think it was Mao Zedong that was still there. So he basically made a deal because of the fact that China was a communist country. They really didn't trade with a lot of people. They were very much of a closed market. But the United States was willing to open up trade with China. They were willing to open trade with China, infuse their markets with capitals, send U.S. companies over to build, the sweatshops that, we used to see over the decades. And it was basically a lopsided deal for China. However, in return, China would support the U.S. in their efforts to fight against Russia, because this was like right after what they call the Sino-Soviet split. I was telling Berg in the chat earlier that China and Russia are actually historical enemies. You know, this them getting together right now is something that new in world history. But the United States took advantage of that and made China this offer to open their markets to, you know, get American companies into China so they can infuse their economic market in exchange for assistance with the war. Well, unfortunately, that didn't work out for them because the U.S. still ended up losing the Vietnam War. But they still kept their deal with China. However, what started to happen is over the last 5 decades, China, what they did with their profits was something that I don't think the United States thought that the Chinese would do, because what they started to do was they started to reinvest in their country instead of, you know, giving it to the rich folks in China, because mind you, China politically is still a communist country. So with all of this capital that's coming into China, they started reinvesting into the country itself, like education, like infrastructure, like a lot of these things that China was building over a span of 5 decades. And then suddenly, China becomes a big market, a big global market at that. So now you're starting to get more income because of the fact that now China is generally upgrading, or how should I say it? They're pivoting their economy away from hard-nosed communism. Despite the fact that their political system is still communist, they're opening up their markets economically, but yet they're still capping a lot of the industry, because if you look at the China markets right now, the regulations are by the government. And while they do have millionaires and billionaires, they don't have carte blanche to do what they want to within China. Take, for example, there's a billionaire in China named, I think his name is Jack Ma. Jack Ma.
Heard of him.
Huh?
I said, yes, I've heard of him.
Yeah. So Jack Ma wanted to do something, and I can't remember. And the Chinese government told him, no, he can't do that. But Jack Ma was basically ousted because of the fact that he went against regulations and I think he was like exiled from China for a little bit.
Yeah, he was missing. We thought that something happened to him in China.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't care if you're a billionaire. They don't care if you're a billionaire. If you do something against their government, you're not gonna be successful. So China reinvested within this country, and over the last 5 decades was able to get 820 million people out of poverty. Because before China made that deal with Kissinger and Nixon back in the early 70s, China was on the verge of bankruptcy. So this investment that they made on their own people, like I said, is something that United States fails to do. I was talking about Berg and the importance of this whole Ukraine situation, because it's part of the military industrial complex, which, you know, gets billions of dollars a year to fuel it. I think I said the number was 820 billion for military spending on the GDP. Do we need to spend $820 million a year? Like, you can take 1/4 of that and bring a lot of people out of homelessness, out of poverty. We can build better schools with 1/4 of that budget, because the military spending for the United States is the total of the next 9 nations that are right below it. So even if we eliminate 1/4 of that spending, we're still spending the most money in military. So our tax dollars is going to a winless war at least for the last couple of years, a winless war that's cost us, I think the estimate was like $300 billion.
It's crazy that we're paying that, and this is insane. So do we have a chance if Trump gets mad, if the president of Ukraine gets mad, do we have a chance?
What do you mean a chance in?
So I was looking at what was going on with the president of the Ukraine and the president of the United States. And it was a big tussle, right? Like, I got this, you got this, and nothing got resolved because we were supposed to get the minerals, right?
Oh yeah. I guess if you're talking about a chance at peace, I don't know, because the problem is that the funding of the war machine takes away a lot of money from the CEOs of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. And also takes away from the pockets of Elon Musk, because now he has all the government contracts now.
But he's doing it for free. But I love when people say that.
He's not doing it for free.
But that's what they're telling us. He does it for free. That's what they're telling me. And I want to thank both you gentlemen, because I'm sitting up here and I'm only listening at things like Gardis brought up a good point. And we have questions in the chat we're going to answer.
Wait, I actually have a question.
Go right ahead.
I think we didn't answer the question regarding the North Korea and South Korea in terms of political lifestyles and all of that. I just wanted to know, like, is there a big difference in that? And what is that? And again, I've heard, pardon my ignorance on this. I'm like Berg. I did not pay attention to world history. Actually, I dished it. So, it's coming back to haunt me now.
Well, I thought I answered it with, like I said, the only difference between North Koreans and South Koreans is the politics and lifestyle.
Yeah. So what I'm asking, what is the politics and lifestyle? If you don't mind me asking.
So the politics, for instance, North Korea is strictly communist. Their politics, their economics, strictly communist, closed markets, only trading with communist countries. So they're very much a closed market and politically communist. South Korea, much more capitalist, much more open market. It's basically what you kind of see in the United States, but in the Far East.
So does North Korea have like a dictator?
Well, I mean, that's what they call what is that North Korean guy's name again? Kim
Jong-un.
Yeah, Kim Jong-un. I mean, if that's what you want to call him, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I'm no big fan of him or any of these guys that they
So I take it that you don't want to meet him.
No, actually, I would love to meet him. I would love to meet him and be interested to hear what he has to say.
So can Americans fly there?
Only through State Department approval, since North Korea is basically kind of like one of those countries where you have to go there for either educational purposes or what was the other reason? Or maybe you may have family there. And because there is no direct flights to Korea. So State Department approval has to be involved if you're talking about coming back to the country.
I was just looking that up too.
So yeah, so you can go to North Korea, but you definitely have to get State Department approval.
Yeah, I was just looking up this guy named Otto Warmbier guy who was, wow, he was sentenced 15 years hard labor for stealing a poster.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
he was in a vegetative state when the United States got him back. And then he died like a month later.
And he was in North Korea?
Yeah, he was in North Korea. I'm reading it now. I'm like looking at it right now. Saying Otto Warmbier.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea definitely has repressive policies, you know, and yeah, I'm not saying that they treat their citizens fairly, but heck, look at black folks here in this country.
Man.
I mean, we get shot dead by the police and the police get off.
And we're talking politics. Look at people here in Dolton.
You know what's interesting?
Can't say nothing.
You know what's interesting is that I had a debate today about police brutality because I had a student, you know, say to me that, you know, George Floyd did not die from the police putting his knee on his neck. He died because he was high on fentanyl. And, you know, I had to like literally, you know, in a polite, respectful way, tell him that's not the case. And we actually agreed to disagree, but that's what he was telling me. Like, no, he died because of fentanyl.
Mm.
He was listening to Candace Owens. I can't believe it. I mean, that's what Candace Owens said. So, okay.
Now, granted, fentanyl is deadly, and if you inhale it, it can knock you out. But I don't think that is the cause of his death.
Yeah, I mean, fentanyl is basically poisonous, and just like you said, Big Mike, you ingest a smidget of it or more, you can literally die from a heart attack. Like, you know, I remember watching a couple of years ago, I was watching a comparison of the amount of heroin that you would need to have a cardiac arrest compared to the amount of fentanyl you need to have a cardiac arrest. And you should have saw like the comparisons. Like there was like this big rock of heroin that you would need in order to get a heart attack. And they looked at the fentanyl. There was, it was like a little speck that you would need to actually have a cardiac arrest.
Wow.
Yeah, they have this whole thing where it's like one pill can kill, but it could be less than a pill. Like they had this one campaign where it was like one pill of fentanyl could kill, but fentanyl is mixed up in all type of things. And I even heard, I don't know if this is true, but it can be someone could touch you with the skin, like through your pores. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, that's crazy.
You know, I'm out here in Arizona. I've been out here. You know, I'm a snowbird, so I come here during the winter. So now, you know, what's interesting is that a lot of people are stealing the formulas and putting fentanyl in them to transport it because, you know, on the surface, again, because it's, you know, white, people will think it's
baby formula.
Yeah, baby formula.
Oh God.
And there was a situation out here recently where they accidentally gave a baby fentanyl because it was mixed into the formula.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, and now they have to like really like, you know, really see, you know, is this really baby formula? Is this mixed with fentanyl? But they use it to transport it, and so that's a big problem out here.
Oh gosh, let me get to some of these questions that you guys had in here. I'm just gonna go up and see if you guys answered any of this. North Korean soldiers are fighting with the Russians against the Ukraine.
Then, you know, that was. Some people are disputing that, even though they say there's video evidence of it, but when I saw the video evidence of it, it looked kind of grainy. So I don't know. Maybe they are fighting because I mean they're both communist countries. Well, let me put it like this. Russia. Here's the thing about Russia that people get this misconception of. Russia technically is not really communist anymore. If you look at Google Vladimir Putin's political party, and you're going to see that he is not part of the Communist Party. And that basically kind of happened back in that shift away from communism actually started back about 5 years before the end of the Soviet Union.
Where, with Boris Yeltsin?
Actually, it started with Mikhail Gorbachev. Where Gorbachev basically, when he was elected president of the Soviet Union, he started to have these political and economic reforms called glasnost and perestroika. These were basically reforms that basically turned away from the hard-nosed communist policies. And actually, many Russian historians basically believe that was basically the start of the collapse of the Soviet Union, because of the fact that this allowed a lot of Russian oligarchs to take control of businesses that was basically controlled by the Russian government or the Soviet government. And once that happened, the oligarchs started going wild and basically kind of dismantle or dismantle a lot of legislative policies that were favored, towards the working class people, that started favoring the Russian oligarchs. And unfortunately, this collapsed the whole Soviet Union, but the Russian Federation, which actually carried on with Boris Yeltsin, still held these policies. And what's interesting is the guy that Boris Yeltsin groomed to take his place after he left being Russian president was Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, like I said, he's basically a Russian oligarch who used to run the KGB when it was the Soviet Union.
Wow.
So go ahead.
No, I was actually listening to it. I was actually reading a comment out loud while he was talking. My apologies. No, I was reading a comment in the chat out loud, and while you was talking, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. No,
I thought I was on mute.
No, what was the comment?
Oh no, it was a comment that was. I mean, I was listening to what Gardis was saying. Didn't want to interrupt that, but the comment that I was looking at that had me speak was that idiot kid. And I was trying to figure out, trying to follow it. Like, what is he? Like, who's the idiot? Like, is he talking about Otto Warmbier? I'm referencing Scott Johnson. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's just that threw me off.
I'm gonna pull it up because I don't know anything about Otto Warmbier, so I'm gonna pull him up right quick.
If it is Otto Warmbier, I mean, to be honest with you, would I've done the same thing? I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know North Korea was this closed of a society until I start talking to Gardis. So if I would have went there, I would have thought it was like America. And I probably would. I don't know. I would have. I probably wouldn't be here right now. So I mean,
yeah, it's not a place. It's not a place where you can go vacation. Like it's a place where, like I said, State Department approval. You have to go there for a specific reason. One of them is education or a delegation, an official delegation that is supported by, like I said, State Department approval. So I believe there was a politician that took a delegation there to North Korea, and then I remember Dennis Rodman, the famous basketball player, took a couple of NBA players, and they played a what do they call it? They played like an exhibition game there because I guess Kim Jong-un is a big basketball fan.
Oh. Okay. And Tracy said, was Otto the U.S. military man who was wandered over North Korea's border and was caught?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, is it? I thought it was a black soldier.
Was it a black soldier?
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I'll probably be thinking about something else. I think it was. Was it the DMZ zone? The demilitarization?
Yeah, the demilitarized zone. Yeah. I think it was. And it's interesting because technically the Korean War is still going on.
Okay. And Ray just said no, a young black soldier. No, Otto wasn't black though. Yeah.
No, Otto was this college kid from the University of Virginia, I believe.
No, I think the black soldier defected over to the North Korean side, if I'm not mistaken.
Why would he do that?
I think that Travis King. Is there anyone?
Yeah, I think he was the one that defected.
But why would you want to defect into a communist closed society country? That doesn't make any sense to me, or I'm sure to a lot of people.
Let's see.
I got Travis King, a former United States Army soldier known for crossing over military demarcation line in the joint security area of North Korea in 2023. Is that who we're talking about?
Yes, because I'm reading it too. Basically, he had some legal charges that he was going to face in South Korea.
So to avoid that, you go to a society where you're not going to have any rights.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was a issue of if he would come to North Korea, and maybe give some secrets to because he was in the military. Maybe they can give him a favorable type of living style.
Okay. Can I ask something? I'll let y'all finish the educational portion because I have a question. And I don't think it's a good question, but I got to know from both you gentlemen. The prisoner exchange with Russia and the Ukraine. What's that all about? Even with Brittany Griner, I think I'm saying it right.
Okay, yeah, you lost me when you said the prison exchange between the Ukraine and Russia.
I'm sorry, Russia and the United States. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Now I understand you.
What was that about? How does that affect us as, a country? Why was it an exchange? Why was it what was it? I don't understand that. When I think about Russia, I always go back to that.
You want to go? You want to take that first, Mike?
Well, I would say that
a basketball player for a Russian arms deal. I'm sorry, Big Mike. I'm sorry, it must be a lag. I'm sorry, I just heard you.
No, that's fine. Normally these deals are done for negotiations on top of this swaps. But for this in particular, to me, it's similar to the deal that the United States made with I think it was not North Korea, it was another country, another closed society country, where Bill Clinton had to go over there and actually negotiate, made a deal where it was also the United States was giving out I think arms or something like that. I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer this question without saying something that would be wrong. I just think that with these types of deals, I feel like it's celebrity, political, helps Biden out in the midterms.
Got it.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. This was a while ago, though. It wasn't recent.
It was okay. It was 5. Okay.
Well, remember Jesse Jackson went over to Kosovo and negotiated the release of American soldiers. What was it, in the late 90s?
And back to North Korea, Ragin said, my son was there. He said, if you y'all would see how hard it is to get into North Korea side. It's so guarded.
Wait, North Korea is that guard? I mean, I know the DMZ zone, but I thought you can get in through the China, like the China path. Because the DMZ is only, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't the DMZ separating North and South, but not China and Russia? Because there's a part of North Korea that is also bordering Russia.
Yeah. There is no DMZ zone between North Korea and Russia. It's just only with it's only with the two Korean nations, and that was only because of the I wouldn't even say, because they still say technically the Korean War is still going on. However, they signed an armistice, which is kind of like a ceasefire for the time being. But it's not necessarily a peace deal. So the demilitarized zone was part of that, was part of the deal.
So if I was to go and tour North Korea, what would I see? Would I see like an urban style? Would I see rural? I'm looking at the pictures of it. I see both. I see a lot of poverty though. Which I'm assuming, like, if it's a communist nation, it's definitely going to be filled with a lot of poverty.
Well, I mean, that all depends on what you consider what is poverty.
Like, I mean, from the pictures I'm looking at, rural lands with literally like shacks that have no roofs on them. Poor infrastructure. People walking with no shoes on. But again, I don't want to say that, and because I'm giving an American perspective to it, I don't know if it's something different.
Yeah.
So I don't want.
That's what they say about Africa, right?
Right.
Yeah, and China's a communist nation, but I just told you that they rose 820 million people out of poverty. So, and China is arguably the second largest economy in the world.
True.
Matter of fact, some people argue it may be the first because of the fact that a lot of our debt, or a lot of U.S. debt, belongs to China, and many companies that are U.S. based have manufacturing companies in China, like Apple, Starbucks.
And we just heard, I just was saying, we saw an army uniform, U.S. Army uniform made in China.
Made in China, and like I said, I think I'm correct when I say over half of the products in Walmart is made in China.
Oh, you saying half? No.
Okay, well, all right. Well, I must be underestimating.
No, yeah, you're underestimating for sure. No, I mean that's just what it is.
So if more than half the products is made in China, how does Trump's trade war going to affect those prices?
Well, it's going to affect it big time. That's why he, he held out. He held out doing the tariffs for another month because I guess he's trying to make a deal with these countries, because he feels, and this is what he feels. Trump feels that a lot of these countries are we're in lopsided trade deals with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that's possible, but go ahead and do your thing. But the narrative out there is that United States is, and I think in a lot of senses, Trump is, what he's saying is not necessarily what is happening. However, he is getting to a point where the United States is losing power in the world, and especially economically, because the dollar is actually losing its value across the world. Many of for several decades, the global currency that countries had traded in their reserve banks was the US dollar. But now what you're starting to see is an alignment of certain countries that are trading in their own currency. There was an economic alliance that was formed about 14 years ago called the BRICS. It's an acronym, BRICS. This is an acronym for the initial nations that had started the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries 14 years ago decided that they were going to trade in their own currency. And also in future hopes, they were actually going to come with their own bank that rivals what they call the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And then also too, one of their ultimate goals was to also have their own currency, a global currency where they can actually trade in and actually get rid of the US dollar. So over the last couple of years, there have been interest in a lot of countries to apply for the BRICS. So countries like in the last 2 years, like Ethiopia, like Ethiopia and Egypt and Indonesia and Iran have joined the BRICS. And then there's several other nations who have applied to be in the BRICS. So you're starting to see the US dollar losing its power, because now these countries are kind of aligning itself, and this alliance has the two biggest economies outside of the United States in China and Russia. Now, also too, in this whole alliance is also India, which, if there is a fourth superpower that arises in the next 20 years, it will probably be India.
Absolutely.
Now, the only thing that's hindering India is their infrastructure, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to take over the technological sector. However, India is having infrastructure problems with holding or creating an industry sector. Now, as far as IT services, which a lot of companies kind of like outsource to India, they can do that. However, the India has an aspiration of being like China, being a more of a technological sector where they can create and create microprocessors, which is actually the new oil in the market. There's a book that I had just recently read, and I don't have it with me because I let somebody read it and they haven't given it back to me. I hate when people don't return my books, but there's a book that was written like about 2 years ago called Chip Wars. And in this book, they argued what I just said about the chips being chips being the new oil, the fight for resources. And the main belligerents in this war is obviously China and the United States, because China actually depends on Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is technically part of the Chinese Republic. However, many nations don't recognize it, like the US don't recognize it as part of China, even though China claims it to be a part of the Chinese Republic. But Taiwan is important because of the fact that Taiwan is the world's leading manufacturer of chips. Now, this is important because of the fact that it's probably one of 3 locations on this earth that can manufacture chips at bulk rate. If people like myself who know about computers, microprocessors are very hard to create. And when you're trying to create them on a bulk level, like trying to get hundreds, thousands, even millions of chips processed, created at a certain time, that takes a high level of equipment and technology that not a lot of nations have. Taiwan is one of those places that has this. There are certain parts in the United States, like Silicon Valley, who would have this. And then there's places in the Netherlands who can process, who can create microprocessors. Because if you look at today's society, technology is dominated by microprocessors. Everything has a computer. And if you have a computer, it has a microprocessor. Cars have microprocessors. This is why the auto industry took a hit when Trump did that trade war with China in his first term, because auto manufacturers couldn't get the processors in time to put in their cars. When we were trying to order laptops at 148, we had to wait like 3 weeks to get our laptops for because we were trying to, at the time, we were trying to go 1-to-1 with students and laptops at the schools, but we had to wait 3 weeks for our order, compared to like before, when we ordered laptops, our laptops will come in a matter of 2 days. So the microprocessor war is going to be a big thing, and this is probably one of the reasons why we're getting into this tussle with China right now.
I could totally agree. You have a couple of comments. Scott Johnson said, it seems like a rug pull with the taxpayers being left holding a bag.
Yeah, I said that earlier. The trade war is only going to hurt the working and poor class people
in the poor class.
Country. Yeah, that's the only people that is going to hurt.
It's the same impact, though. The trade war from China, is that same impact is going to be from Mexico as well?
Well, I mean, United States' biggest trading partner is Mexico. So obviously, yeah, they've already talked about because the tariffs actually was supposed to happen now from Mexico, but there was a report today that Trump is going to hold off for another month, maybe try to negotiate a deal. But the Mexican president, she just got elected, Gloria Sheinbaum, I think, first female president of Mexico, was already ramping up their economy to take this hit on the tariffs. One of the biggest and most popular exports of Mexico is avocados. And they've already been talking about how the price of avocados are going to go up 2 or 3 times. So if they do have this trade war with Mexico, expect to be buying avocados for like $5.
Okay. And finally, before we go, and I don't mean to cut it short, but I got a family thing I got to get to. Regina said, a little off topic, but did anyone watch the press conference today with the crypto guys and Trump?
No,
Did y'all watch that? I didn't see it.
that. Yeah, I missed that. Sorry,
Oh.
I gotta go back and see that. You know, I normally just, you know, with Trump, I try to read the transcripts. Like when he did that press conference, I didn't want to watch that, but I read transcripts, so because I can't stand hearing him. So
Okay, Scott says, speaking of tariffs, they're saying there's 100% tariff being proposed regarding Teslas imported into Canada. What?
yeah.
Oh, Elon doing it for free.
Yeah. Oh, can I ask Big Mike a question?
Please.
You know, Big Mike is very knowledgeable about the, you know, the finances and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure he listens to, you know, certain people who talks about the importance of finances. What do you think about John Hope Bryant?
John Hope Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
Enlighten me. I don't know who that is.
So John Hope Bryant is a black guy who, I guess he's a millionaire because he does consulting with a lot of companies and stuff like that, but he just seems to kind of talk down on a lot of black folks. He's also the type of person that he doesn't believe.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I see the face. Yeah. That's the guy that is. So I used to work with a guy named Bruce Montgomery from Chicago a while back. I don't know if you know who Bruce is.
Lawyer?
So no, that's you're thinking about what's the guy's name?
James Montgomery.
James Montgomery, yeah. Bruce Montgomery works for Operation Hope, and he works for the Chicago office, and he works for this guy. To be honest with you, I do like his organization, Operation Hope, because it has helped a lot of small businesses, especially small African American businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen that, but with him and his politics, I would disagree with. But I do think that Operation Hope is indeed a good company for minority-owned businesses.
I can see that. His personality. I would not want to have a conversation with him personally, because it just seems like when I watch him, you know, and especially when he's talking to an African American audience, he talks down on us a lot, and to me, that's not very helpful. You know, obviously, we're seeing this play out in the Dolton situation with Cassandra. Like, yeah, you want to give us good information, but yeah, don't talk to us like, you know, we're your 5-year-old boy or girl. And I just feel like there is an arrogance about him that I don't see in some people, even like yourself, who, you know, teaches us the importance of finance, but you don't sit there and says, Berg, what is that soundbite Shay uses where he says, I'm broke and you're he said,
yeah, I'm
you're
broke, you're rich, you're broke.
Yeah, I'm rich and you're broke.
You sound like LeBron James. That's what LeBron James said in the when he lost in the 2011 finals.
I think that's what it was him. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that sounds exactly what this guy does. You know, again, I don't agree with how he approach you know, entrepreneurs or his politics, but I do think his organization has helped a lot of minority-owned businesses.
Okay, and I, you know what, I could see that, because maybe the people who run it here in Chicago and in other cities probably have some autonomy to to that, and they don't have to necessarily expound his personal politics. So
definitely, and I got your message, Berg. I hope everything is all well.
Oh, we're getting through it. Thank you, y'all. We got it. I'm taking shifts. We're taking shifts over here. Any final messages, you guys?
For me, the only thing is that let's pay attention to global politics. I think that's as important as local politics. What is the old saying? Work locally and think globally. And I think the thing is that we have to understand that what happens outside of this area that we live in is basically a microcosm of what's happening across the world. So pay attention to geopolitics as well.
Well, all we have to do is send the Daltonites down to Russia. They'll get together. You going to jail. Okay, go ahead, Big Mike.
Send the advocate to Russia.
She could send them all to North Korea, especially those that causes a lot of problems, so we'll never see them again. It just, so learning about the trade wars and how it has an impact on the consumer is very important. And I think that we all need to understand how when the president of the United States declares a trade war with this country, or when this country declares a trade war on the United States, how does it affect the individual? See, a lot of people don't think of it that way. They just think, oh, it's just news. But then wonder, wait, why am I paying $5 for a bottle of Coke, for example, or a bottle of Pepsi? And that's because you have to be more attentive to those things. And I say all the time, politics is very local, but international politics does indeed have some impact on how your life is lived locally. And I think that just paying close attention to a lot of the geopolitical problems can definitely get you to start planning for your finances a lot sooner, for just in case hiccups, like as I just articulated, does happen.
You're absolutely right. I went to the store today, and everything I picked up was $5 and some cents, Big Mike. Every single item. I couldn't make a regular dinner without paying $5 an item. You're right.
And it's going to get worse if these tariffs go through.
I appreciate both you gentlemen. Hope to see you next week. Big Mike, you got so many people emailing me about finances. Hope we can cover some of that, because I don't mind knowing more. And Gardis, you have so many people emailing me about history, Black history. It's so interesting. So I cannot wait. I love you guys on my channel, but I'm going to be so sad when y'all start your own channels. I'm going to be like, what am I do?
I mean, you're invited to my channel. Everybody is. So, and I don't think I'm going to get that much heat because I'm not talking Dolton politics. But everybody's invited to my channel, though.
Big Mike, JD Vance might say something. He all on YouTube. JD Vance don't play. He in the social media.
Well, I got some things about him, but I mean, that's a story for a different time. But yeah, I know some things about that guy.
Very interesting. Well, I appreciate you both.
All righty. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Big Mike. Thank you, Gardis Watts. I appreciate you all the time. The only thing I knew about Russia was Flavor Flav and Bridget Nielsen. That's all. What was y'all know who Bridget Nielsen is?
Yeah.
The red. What was she was in that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Who he gets confused with being something that he's not. He gets confused with that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you both.
All righty. You all have a good night.
Have a great night, guys.
Take care.
Bye. So we had Gardis Watts and Big Mike. Sorry, y'all had to eat some trail mix in between. I didn't eat all day. So I just thank them both for being here and being able to give us all this history that we are uncovering. And you guys have amazing questions. And I'm just so thankful that they come through every week just to give us some knowledge, because I'm not going to give y'all nothing but reality. Okay. Y'all have Regina. I'm going to look that up. I want to hear what happened with crypto. Regina said, I really want to learn more about crypto. Trump's Mimi coin has made over $300 million in fees. Wow. Thank you. I appreciate you, Winky. Raging. Y'all thought I was playing. Y'all don't this was my favorite these are the people besides Cody Brown that got me into reality and getting me to want to talk about YouTube. And you can find some of my old videos over on my Patreon. But it was these two right here. And I thought she was from Russia, right? And she's Danish, I believe. She's not even from Russia. She's like Danish. Well, may she rest in peace. All right, you guys. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to 3 different sides, maybe 4, because I have 2 different sides. And I appreciate you all. Take care of yourself and each other. And I'll see you guys next time. I want to look up that Bitcoin. Thank you so much. You guys are giving me so much energy with that. Bye.
More you pray.
Blue Commentary, Burgundy Commentary, Blue Commentary, Burgundy Blue.